Paul's descent into darkness seemed endless. Each day blurred into the next, a haze of drugs, alcohol, and fleeting moments of clarity where he could freestyle his pain to indifferent strangers. But one evening, as he sat on the curbside, strumming a makeshift beat on a tin can, he met someone who would change his life in unexpected ways. It was late, and the market was nearly deserted. Paul was lost in his music when he noticed a man standing nearby, watching him intently. The man was tall and lean, with a weathered face that spoke of hard times. His clothes were worn but clean, and his eyes held a mix of curiosity and empathy. "Hey there," the man said, stepping closer. "Your music, it's raw, real. What's your name?" Paul looked up, startled by the genuine interest. "I'm Paul, just trying to get by, you know?" The man nodded. "I'm Changa. I run a small stall in the market. Times are tough, but I can't help but feel your pain in your music. What's your story?" Paul hesitated, then began to share his tale. He spoke of his mother's death, his grandmother's passing, the loss of his twin brother, and his father's death. He told Changa about his stepmother's cruelty, his homelessness, and his struggles with addiction. Changa listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. When Paul finished, Changa placed a hand on his shoulder. "You know, Paul, I don't have much. I barely make enough to feed my family, but I believe in helping those who need it. Come with me. Let's see if we can change your luck." Changa led Paul to a small, two-roomed house at the edge of the market. It was modest and cramped, but it was filled with warmth and love. Changa's wife, Mrs. Changa, was a kind woman with a gentle smile. Their children, 2 girls and a boy, looked at Paul with wide, curious eyes. "Who is this Changa?" Mrs. Changa asked, her voice soft but firm. "This is Paul," Changa replied. "He's had a tough life, and he needs a place to stay. I told him we could help." Mrs. Changa smiled warmly at Paul. "Welcome, Paul. We don't have much, but what we have, we share. Make yourself at home." Paul was overwhelmed by their kindness. "Thank you, Mrs. Changa. Thank you, Changa. I don't know how to repay you." Mrs. Changa shook her head. "No need for thanks, Paul. Just treat this house as your own." As days turned into weeks, Paul settled into his new life. He slept on the sofa, while Changa's children slept on the floor. Despite their own struggles, the Changa family made sure Paul had food and money for his diabetic medication. Paul began to feel a sense of belonging he had long forgotten. One evening, after dinner, Paul sat with Changa on the porch. The market was quiet, the day's work done. Paul looked at Changa, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Changa, I believe music can change my life if I get the right support," Paul said. "I've been freestyling for years, but I've never had the chance to really record anything or perform properly." Changa nodded thoughtfully. "I see the passion in you, Paul. I believe you can make it. We'll do what we can to support you." Despite their best efforts, the community began to gossip. People whispered about the Changa family taking in a homeless man. Some suggested he might steal from them or harm their daughters. One day, Mrs. Changa was at the market when a neighbor approached her. "I heard you've taken in a homeless man. Aren't you worried about your family's safety?" Mrs. Changa smiled calmly. "Paul is part of our family now. We believe in giving people a chance. He hasn't given us any reason to doubt him." That evening, Mrs. Changa shared the conversation with Paul and Changa. Paul looked down, feeling the weight of the community's distrust. "I'm sorry," Paul said quietly. "I don't want to cause trouble for your family." Changa shook his head. "Let them talk, Paul. We know who you are. You're not just some homeless man. You're family now, and family supports each other." Despite the gossip, the Changa family continued to support Paul. They found small ways to help him with his music. Changa introduced Paul to a local musician who had a small recording studio. With the family's financial support, Paul recorded his first few tracks. One evening, as Paul was freestyling in the market, a small crowd gathered. They were drawn by his raw, emotional lyrics. Among them was a local radio DJ who saw potential in Paul's music. After the performance, the DJ approached Paul. "You've got talent, man. How would you like to perform on my radio show?" Paul's eyes lit up. "Really, that would be amazing." Changa, who had been watching from his stall, walked over and put an arm around Paul. "See, Paul? People are starting to notice. This is just the beginning." While there were moments of hope, Paul's life remained a struggle. The gossip never fully died down, and every time something went missing in the market, fingers pointed at Paul. One afternoon, Paul and Changa were working at the stall when a woman approached, glaring at Paul. "I heard my daughter's bracelet went missing. You didn't take it, did you?" Paul's face flushed with anger and hurt. "I didn't take anything. I would never steal." Changa stepped in, his voice firm. "Paul is part of our family. He wouldn't do that. Let's not jump to conclusions without proof." Despite the accusations and the gossip, the Changas stood by Paul. They continued to support him, providing him with the stability he needed to pursue his music. But the weight of suspicion and the constant struggle for acceptance took its toll on Paul. His past continued to haunt him, and the road ahead remained uncertain. Yet through it all, Paul's resilience shone through. His music, inspired by his pain and struggles, became a powerful voice in the community, a testament to his enduring spirit and the unbreakable bond with the family who took him in when he had nowhere else to go. Moral of the episode: ignore rich people, help comes from the poor. Watch out for part 3. Please comment, like, and subscribe.